3 tips you probably didn't even know existed for every single Dead by Daylight killer. Chucky. Most of you know that survivors can see real-time footsteps if you're within 16 meters of them. However, the survivors can only see your footsteps if they would normally be able to see a regular height killer. So if you're behind a tall wall, they won't be able to see your footsteps even if you're right next to them. Usually, you'll make the survivor vault sound whenever you vault a window. However, you can suppress the sound completely if you vault while you have your stealth mode active. This can allow you to do mind games like the double vault mind game at Shack. Since you don't automatically swing when you come in contact to a survivor while dashing, you can slide straight off of survivors that are trying to body block your target and get the hit anyway. Trapper. If you have a trap while looping someone and they're about to throw a pallet on you, start placing your trap to stop dead in your tracks and you'll prevent yourself from being stunned. If you're worried about getting flashlight saved or pallet saved and you have a trap on you, you can start placing the trap over the survivor's body and it'll look like you're picking them up to bait survivors out of their hiding spots. On a TL wall, rather than placing your trap in front of one of the windows, place it at the tip of this wall on this bush. This spot hides the trap almost perfectly, and from my experience, that's where I get most of my trap kills. Plague. One of Plague's best add-ons is Black Incense, which shows you the auras of survivors whenever they vomit. But something you should know is that survivors won't vomit unless they're at least 50% sick. So if you're not seeing the auras of sick survivors, that might be why. Normally, survivors lose collision when they get injured, but if they get injured by your Vile Purge, they won't lose collision. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where you trap the survivor in a corner, don't hit them normally. Instead, take the time to puke on them until they're injured and then down them for a free hook. Remember to always keep track of the number of pools you can see around the map. If you notice that there's a lot of auras for the pools, that means the survivors probably only have 1 or 2 more pools left to cleanse. If all of these pools become corrupted, you'll automatically get your corrupt purge like 10 seconds later, so try to situate yourself accordingly. Blight. Some really good survivors will do something called a crouch tech in doorways or on stairs to prevent you from hitting them. You can completely counter this by just looking down and swinging at the last possible second. You can rush backwards by bumping into a wall, slightly looking in the direction you want to travel, and then rush while moving your camera in the opposite direction. This will make you rush backwards, which is known in the community as a moon rush. I'll leave a link in the description to a fantastic guide that shows you how to do this, so you can add that to your watch later. After you get blinded while rushing, swing your weapon as fast as possible. This will allow you to swing before your fatigue animation is over. If you're able to track the survivor while blinded, you could potentially get a free down or a free grab. Try to listen to my second swing sound in this clip. It's a lot faster than the fatigue length. Huntress. Hatchets can go through some ceilings on Midwich, Gideon, and Larry's, so you could hit some crazy cross maps like this. If you want to see some other insane shots like this, check out Squirtle Surgeon on Twitter. Also, thank you to Fear for helping me record background footage. A link to his channel will be in the description below. Survivors that unhook near you will position themselves so that if you throw a hatchet, it'll hit the person on the hook instead. So rather than putting your hatchet away, it's sometimes better to just throw the hatchet at the person that just got unhooked and chase the other survivor. It takes just a few seconds to throw a single hatchet, but it'll take the survivor a whole 16 seconds to mend. So now you're essentially pressuring 2 people at once. On Gideon Meat Plant, you're able to throw a hatchet through this railing on the staircase when somebody's vaulting at the top. Just try to aim kind of at the top part of the railing and your hatchet will go straight through it. Hillbilly. If you're on PC, you can set your secondary turning keybinds to Q and E. This will allow you to continually turn while chainsawing at the maximum speed without losing space on your mouse pad. And these buttons are considered controller controls, so make sure you turn up the sensitivity on your controller settings as well. If you're chasing a survivor and they come up to a pallet, feather your chainsaw by tapping it once to make the chainsaw sound. You won't slow down at all, and the survivor may think that you're going for a chainsaw because of the sound and will greed the pallet, hopefully giving you time to catch up to them. Although you should never overheat, if you're getting very close to overheating and you just downed a survivor, just keep tapping your chainsaw until it overheats fully because it'll be a shorter cooldown than waiting for it to go down all the way. Legion. If there are multiple survivors that are grouped up but are all injured, sometimes it's still worth it to use your power to force all of them to mend and give you additional slowdown. If you're trying to find a specific survivor and don't want to chase the survivor you're currently chasing, just use your ability and hit them so you can see the heartbeats of any other survivors in your terror radius. This is a great way to get rid of all of those annoying stealth players that do nothing but hide all game. Some less experienced survivors will throw a pallet on you even if you're in feral frenzy. If you notice that there's a survivor doing this, try to chase them last while you're using your power and get them to pallet stun you. This completely eliminates your power fatigue and wastes a pallet. Doctor. You can use your static shock to completely prevent the survivor from escaping through the hatch. If you shock them just before they get to it, they won't be able to escape and you're able to down them and pick them up before they can slide into the hatch. If you pair Overwhelming Presence, Merciless Storm, and Hex Huntress Lullaby, as well as the purple and yellow Calm add-ons, you can make the Merciless Storm skill checks extremely hard to hit. This is one of the most fun things to go against a survivor in my opinion, and it's gonna absolutely destroy newer survivors. Don't only use your Static Blast for information, use it for slowdown too. If you ever find grouped up survivors, Static Blast them to increase their madness by an entire tier. You'll be getting a lot more value out of your power. Skull Merchant. Now, Skull Merchant becomes undetectable for 8 seconds after setting a drone up. So you could use this to try to sneak up on survivors, but if you're doing this, you have to keep in mind that your terror radius doesn't instantly disappear, but instead fades out over a second or so. Drones can still detect survivors through holes as long as the hole is bigger than 3 centimeters. So use this information to plan your drone placements to get some sneaky detections that'll injure survivors through walls. If there's a yellow light on top of your radar scanner, that means there's at least one survivor that you are tracking. If it's off, that means you're no longer tracking anyone. Xenomorph. Hitting a turret with your tail counts as a missed attack, which slows you down quite significantly for the duration of your attack cooldown. So if you can, try to use cover to M1 the turrets instead of using your tail, because it'll be much faster. If you see a turret that's in a bad position, don't even bother destroying it. So many people get tunnel visioned on destroying turrets since they're the only things that can realistically counter you, but if it's not going to affect you in any way, there's no point in wasting time destroying it. If you look at the boxes above your tunnels, it tells you the number of turrets that are available for the survivors to grab from these boxes around the map. I don't really know how useful this will be, but it's a cool fact nonetheless. Ghostface. If you can't find a survivor that you slugged a while ago, go into your stealth. If a survivor ever looks in your direction, it'll give you an indicator of where they are. And if they reveal you, then you'll know exactly where they are. If you're chasing the strongest survivor on the team, use your Night Shroud and chase rather than just using it to sneak up on people. This can help confuse the survivor and chase, but can also allow you to make plays where you just completely detour to another person without them knowing. There are some locations where you can basically stalk through really sneaky areas. Try to find these so you can stalk people without them even knowing. Wraith. If you stand still, you go completely invisible but still have a hitbox. I don't really want to suggest how you could take advantage of this, so do with that information what you will. You can cloak during a chase to instantly lose chase with that survivor while you're still following them. This is a great way to farm play with your food stacks while chasing the obsession. The Brown Beast add-on makes the Wraith have a terror radius even while cloaked. You can use this to your advantage with Dark Devotion to achieve 2 separate terror radiuses on the map and cause a ton of chaos. Spirit. Survivors' breathing gets heavier and louder if they've been sprinting for about 8 to 10 seconds. So if you're planning on using your phase to hit them while they're healthy, try chasing them for 10 seconds before going into your phase to ensure that they're easier to hear. If you want to be able to hear footsteps better, right-click on the volume icon in the bottom right of your taskbar, open sound settings, then scroll down until you see more sound settings. Then in the playback tab, find your audio output device and double-click on it. Under the enhancements tab, turn on loudness equalization to see if that helps. This will make louder sounds like generators quieter and quieter sounds like footsteps louder. Your husk has a hitbox while you're teleporting, so you can use this to block certain pathways or resources. Deathslinger. Remember that you can shoot through almost any holes in any wall to get free injures and downs. This can be an extremely good way to completely shock survivors. Behavior confirmed that they don't have any problem with you using a crosshair, so if you want to use a crosshair, you'll probably find one in your monitor menu somewhere. There's also programs that you can download to implement crosshairs, but use that at your own risk. There's a common misconception that walking backwards while reeling a survivor reels them in faster. However, this is completely untrue and is actually the same exact speed. Reeling backwards only makes their wiggling from side to side less drastic, making it more difficult for them to catch themselves on an obstacle. Trickster. Just like Huntress, Trickster has a lullaby that plays even if you're undetectable, so don't use stealth perks on him because survivors will still know that you're coming. With the new Trickster update, he can get main event extremely easily, which makes him super strong when hooking survivors in the basement. So because of this, you may want to consider bringing Scourge Hook Monster Shrine to synergize with the strength. Remember that you can cancel your main event by pressing the main event button again, even though it doesn't say that anywhere on your screen. Wesker. The cooldown for your ability is reduced by half a second per infected survivor, so you can have a faster charging ability if you prevent survivors from disinfecting themselves. Learn how to hug tech. This is a great way to throw survivors off guard. I'll leave a link in the description to a really good hug tech tutorial. Remember that Wesker's the only killer to have a large terror radius of 40 meters. Keep this in mind when you're creating your perk build, since some perks will synergize with this large terror radius, but some perks will be worse. Clown. Throw bottles on high areas to make the gas spread out in a much larger area. One of the best counters to Clown is to pre-drop pallets, so use perks that counter this playstyle, such as Brutal Strength or Dissolution. Hitting a survivor with a bottle will not interrupt their current action unless you directly impact them. So if you're trying to prevent someone from unhooking, cleansing your hex totem, unlocking an exit gate, or literally any other interactable, just be patient and make sure to directly impact them. Singularity. The number of slipstream survivors increases your overclock mode by 1 second per slipstream survivor, so you can get up to a maximum of 8.7 seconds of overclock mode when the default overclock is normally 4.7. If you have a biopod within the new anti-camping radius of a hooked survivor, the lock-on rate of your teleportation or tagging gets reduced to 10% of your default charge speed. So if you're wondering why it's so slow, it's because you're close to a hooked survivor. A lot of people seem to think that overclock mode is only used for the instant pallet break feature if you get stunned, but it also increases all action speeds by 75%, allowing you to vault extremely fast and kick things extremely fast. You can also instantly break pallets by teleporting through them. Nurse. If you want to throw a good survivor off guard, make it look like you're going to blink in a different direction and then quickly quickly turn to blink towards your actual target. This is known as head faking because a survivor will feel safe if they see you in the distance facing a direction that's going away from them and will not expect you to blink towards them. You don't make any footstep sounds since you're floating off the ground, so do with that information what you will. You can see survivors in lockers by teleporting through the lockers. It's pretty hard to see because it only shows for a couple frames, but just keep that in mind. Myers, pair monitor and abuse with dead rabbit to basically have a non-existent tear radius for the majority of the game. You can stalk survivors through the tiniest of gaps like windows on second story buildings or through specific cracks around the map, and they'll probably never even notice you. You can use your increased lunge distance to make it from the second story of Midwich over the god pallet at the stairs below. It takes practice, but it can be helpful if you're trying not to break that pallet for whatever reason. Onryo, try to focus on chasing survivors that are carrying the tape. They gain 2 stacks of condemned if you hit them while they're carrying one, and it immediately destroys it. The survivors lose 3 stacks of condemned if they return the tape to a TV, but if you're consistently using your teleport, it'll make it very difficult for the survivors to find active TVs to return the tape. If you see that one of your TVs is on and is playing the tape, that means that there is a survivor within 16 meters of that TV. If it just shows static, that means that there's no survivor nearby. Oni, if you're close to a survivor while in your power, don't just click your attack button or it won't insta-down them. Instead, you just have to hold it for like half a second more and it'll insta-down them. Try to prioritize chasing healthy survivors. In a majority of situations, it'll be more beneficial since you're either going to injure them to get more blood on the map, or you're in your power so you deal 2 health states. Don't be afraid to use your power even if you don't know where survivors are. It's still a fantastic tool for mobility, and if you're good at keeping survivors injured, you'll have plenty of blood around the map to get your power back anyway. Night, your guards don't deactivate perks that require you to be a certain distance away from the survivor. So perks like Hex Devour Hope or Make Your Choice can still activate while you have a guard pressuring the hook. If you create a patrol path that's longer than 10 meters, you'll gain a 5% speed boost for 2 to 10 seconds depending on the length of the path. This is a cool detail, but I don't ever see it being actually practical. If you're chasing a survivor and they pick up the flag, make sure you wait at least 3 seconds before hitting them. There's so many complexities to this killer that a lot of people forget that picking up the flag grants the survivor endurance for a few seconds. Bubba, most people know that if a survivor hops into a locker, that you should bump into the locker to make it more difficult for the survivor to jump out at the exact moment your tantrum ends. But instead of just bumping into the locker, bump into it and spin frantically in circles so it's harder for the survivor to see your chainsaw. A lot of good survivors will count how many times you swing your saw up and down in the tantrum and be able to time it perfectly, but if you're spinning extremely fast, it makes them much harder for them to do that. If you ever bump into a wall while chasing a survivor, try your hardest to touch a breakable wall or downed pallet because it'll instantly end your tantrum. If you time it perfectly, you can hit a survivor with your chainsaw while they throw the pallet down. This takes a lot of practice and timing, but it's a great way to waste a resource. Dredge. If there's one survivor left in an endgame situation, place your remnant on an exit gate switch. This will force survivors to break your remnant if they want to touch the exit gate, which removes the smoky effects from the edges of your screen so you know that they're there. Then you can just teleport to a nearby locker and find them pretty easily. You can see when survivors go into lockers while holding your remnant or while teleporting. It's super subtle and you have to really pay attention to the locker auras to see it, but it can lead you to getting free information or even free downs if you're able to teleport to the locker in time. Many people think that you can only speed up the nightfall cooldown by injuring survivors. However, you can also speed it up by hooking survivors, hiding inside lockers, having multiple survivors injured, and even teleporting back to your remnant. So by using your power more often in chase, you'll get to nightfall much quicker. Nemesis. Don't be afraid to kill your zombies if they're in a bad position. Although it takes like 30 seconds, it'll respawn them somewhere else on the map, which could potentially be much more helpful. Get to tier 2 as fast as possible. You should almost never commit to a single chase if you're still in tier 1 because you won't be able to break pallets with your whip, which will give you a really bad start. You can whip any survivor as long as you can see their head. So even if a survivor is crouching behind an object, if you could see their head, you can hit them. Pinhead. Lethal Pursuer is a great perk on Pinhead because you can determine where the box probably spawned. The box spawns at the furthest location away from every single player, including you, so you can use this info to get a really early chain hunt. In this clip, I'm using an add-on that shows you the aura, but normally you won't be able to see the aura. When you pick up the box to start the chain hunt, it'll make everybody scream and will respawn the box somewhere else after 10 seconds or so. So if you know where every single survivor is 10 seconds after you pick up the box, then you can figure out exactly where to find the box again. Hex Face the Darkness is a great perk to use on Pinhead because it makes survivors randomly scream. This can force survivors to stop solving the box, which can give you additional time to teleport to them or to get closer to them and initiate a chase. Freddy. You can place snares through windows, which can be extremely helpful on some loops like Shack, for example. Normally, survivors you hit will instantly go into the dream world. However, survivors that just woke themselves up from a clock have immunity to this for 30 seconds. So if you're wondering why the survivor isn't triggering your snares after you just hit them, that might be why. The more survivors you have asleep, the faster your cooldown for teleporting will be. So try to keep as many survivors asleep as possible. Executioner. If you find a caged survivor and you know that there's other survivors nearby, you could stand right next to the cage for a few seconds to teleport it to the complete opposite side of the map. If a survivor's tormented, hook them instead of caging them if they're on their first or second hook stage. This will keep them tormented and will allow you to not only see their trail to make chases easier, but will let you instantly mori them when you down them again. When you cage a survivor, they will be put into the furthest cage spawn away from you. You can use this information to know exactly where survivors may go to get the save, especially if you memorize the spawn locations. Artist. A lot of people launch their crows towards gens right when they spawn, and this will probably get you zero info. Instead, wait a few seconds before doing this to allow time for the survivors to get on the gens. Don't always use 3 crows when trying to hit a survivor. The more crows you use, the more your cooldown is. If you think you can hit a survivor with only 1 or 2 of your crows, do that. This will give your power back before the survivor can repel the crows, which will allow you to do the shotgun formation to deal a health state when you launch your next crow. While you're using your crows for information, try to collateral gens by lining them up. This will let you check more than 3 gens at a time. Twins. Switch to Victor in sneaky positions like behind walls or in bushes. Since Charlotte goes undetectable when you're controlling Victor, you may catch some survivors by surprise when you switch back. If you down a survivor on a pallet, you can put Victor on the other side to prevent a survivor from pallet saving because Victor has collision. If you're using Victor for information, try putting him on a higher elevation. This will force survivors to spend much more time getting to him if they want to kick him, which can give you more time to switch to Victor and injure them. If you want to get better at the twins, I'd really recommend checking out Lynxie's channel. Hag. If you're chasing someone and they're about to throw a pallet, start placing a trap to stop yourself immediately and avoid a stun. If you're on an indoor map and you're trapping stairs, put it at the top. Survivors will not be able to see the trap unless they're coming from upstairs. When hooking someone in the basement, hook them on the left hook, then put a trap in this corner right here. Since it's hidden by this small wall, survivors won't notice it when they're coming down and will probably still trigger it. Also, fun fact, if you're using the purple disfigured ear add-on that causes the traps to have collision, survivors can land on top of the hag trap. It'll start spinning so fast that it launches them into outer space permanently. This isn't really a tip because I don't think you could practically pull this off in game, but I still thought it was funny nonetheless. Pig. Crouching will not immediately remove your terror radius, but will gradually fade it out over a few seconds. If you're trying to sneak up to survivors, make sure you crouch just a little bit before you think you need to prevent the survivors from hearing your terror radius at all. If you notice that survivors keep leaving the loops every time you try to ambush them, take advantage of their greed. Make sure you crouch while in the survivor's line of sight so they start to leave the loop, but then immediately uncrouch and chase them normally. They'll probably not have enough distance to make it to the next loop. Pig's biggest strength is her mid-game slowdown. This synergizes really well with perks that create even more objectives like Hex Plaything and Hex Pentimento, since the survivors now have 3 additional objectives in their match. It makes it much more difficult for them to decide what they should prioritize. Demogorgon. You could shred over windows and pallets if you're on a high area. Unfortunately, you're not able to hit any survivors when you do this though, because you'll just bounce right off, but it can be good for mobility. There are a ton of objects in the game that have terrible collision, similar to things you might slide off of if you're using Blight. Take advantage of this to get some insane shreds. Try to put your portals in grass, even if it takes you longer to go to that area. It'll make it much more difficult for survivors to notice the portal, which could give them less time to react to you teleporting. If you learned something new, drop a like and comment a bear emoji down below, and YouTube thinks that you'll like this video here, so check it out and see if they're right.